You ever wonder what happens when trust is shattered in the most unimaginable way? When the person you thought would never betray you suddenly becomes a stranger in your life. Imagine discovering that your partner, someone you've shared your heart, your home, your future with, has been secretly meeting powerful, high-profile figures behind your back. Would you forgive them? Or would you act? For Prince Harry, this nightmare became reality, not through the tabloids, not through whispers in the press, but through a revelation that came from the unlikeliest of sources. Princess Anne, his aunt, the Queen's fiercely loyal daughter. It all began quietly in Montecito, California, a place that for most seemed like paradise. Rolling hills, stunning estates, a peaceful sanctuary far from the relentless scrutiny of the British press. To the outside world, Harry and Meghan's life, there was idyllic. Heir to the throne turned Hollywood expatriate, she, the glamorous, ambitious Duchess of Sussex, building a private life that merged celebrity with royalty. But beneath the manicured lawns and sun-soaked afternoons, a storm was brewing. Small things, barely noticeable to anyone but insiders, began to whisper hints of tension. Missed calls, vague excuses, hushed meetings. Harry brushed them off at first. After all, Meghan was a woman of influence, connections, and ambitions. Maybe she simply had things to manage. But when Princess Anne got involved, everything changed. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Anne reportedly stumbled upon information that made her blood run cold. Allegedly, Meghan had been secretly meeting with high-profile men, figures who weren't just business associates, not just Hollywood executives, but men whose names alone could provoke scandal if ever tied publicly to a Duchess of Sussex. And, ever vigilant and protective of her family, allegedly confronted Harry privately, dropping a bombshell that would alter the course of their Montecito life forever. How did Anne discover this? Who were these men? And more importantly, how did Harry respond once he learned the truth? These are the questions that would haunt him, questions that would demand action, and questions that, for the public, remained tantalizingly unanswered. From Harry's perspective, the betrayal cut deep. This wasn't gossip, and it wasn't hearsay. It came from someone he trusted, someone whose judgment he respected. Princess Anne doesn't deal in frivolity. Her reputation for honesty and her sharp instincts are legendary. If she said something, Harry knew he had to take it seriously. And the severity of her revelation shook him to his core. Because the Montecito dream, quiet walks with Archie and Lilibet, serene evenings at their sprawling estate, the illusion of freedom from royal scrutiny, was built on the foundation of trust. And that foundation had been cracked, if not shattered entirely. So what does a man do when faced with such a revelation? How do you reconcile love with betrayal? For Harry, the choice wasn't simple. He spent nights pacing, revisiting every conversation, every gesture, every moment they'd shared in that sun-drenched California mansion. The emotional weight was crushing. He didn't just feel hurt, he felt cornered. What could be done? How do you act when the world is watching, when every step is magnified, and when your actions could redefine public perception of the monarchy, Hollywood, and personal integrity all at once? And then came the fateful decision, the one that would shock the world and leave even their closest allies speechless. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, allegedly made the call that would sever the private life they'd been building together. He ordered Meghan Markle out of Montecito. The reasoning? Allegedly tied directly to the revelations made by Princess Anne. Those meetings, those secret encounters that supposedly undermined everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved. The house, the lifestyle, the idyllic calm, it was over. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, that decision was only the opening act of a drama that would ripple through the royal family, the media, and beyond. Imagine being Meghan at that moment, arriving home one evening, thinking she's in her sanctuary, only to find that her partner, the very person she believed was her confidant, has made the decision to cut her off from the life they'd shared. Panic, shock, anger, confusion, and then the whispers, and had discovered everything. The news, if it reached the press, could destroy reputations, careers, and relationships in one fell swoop. Was Meghan defensive? Was she calculating? Or was she as blindsided as everyone else would assume she was? The truth is layered, complicated, and riddled with contradictions, but the impact on Harry was undeniable. He felt compelled to act, to protect his family, and to reclaim the sense of safety that had been stripped away. But the intrigue doesn't stop with a simple confrontation. According to sources close to the family, Meghan's secret encounters weren't isolated incidents. They were a series of meetings, carefully orchestrated, hidden from the public eye, designed in a way that only someone with extensive networks and resources could manage. And Anne, with her keen observation and relentless diligence, allegedly pieced together the puzzle. She saw patterns, noted inconsistencies, and connected the dots that others had overlooked. For Harry, hearing this from, and someone who had always been an unwavering pillar in his life, was a gut punch. He realized that the world he thought he had left behind in England might not be as far away as he hoped. Audiences might wonder, why Montecito? Why now? Why not earlier? But the timing was critical. Harry had been carving out a life that balanced personal freedom with family obligations. Meghan's alleged secret activities threatened that balance, putting their children, their public image, and even their philanthropic endeavors at risk. It wasn't merely about betrayal in the private sphere. It was about the cascading consequences that could affect everything Harry valued. And when you are a public figure whose every move is scrutinized, betrayal isn't a private matter, it's a public crisis. And here's the kicker. This story, as explosive as it is still shrouded in secrecy. While the public has seen glimpses of tension between the Sussexes, the truth behind the Montecito fallout has been closely guarded. Insiders hint at explosive meetings, hushed confrontations, and strategies designed to protect the family while managing a woman whose influence and connections extend far beyond the borders of California. Imagine being in Harry's shoes, having to navigate love, loyalty, family, and public perception all at once. It's a psychological maze, and one misstep could have monumental consequences. As we dig deeper into this story, you'll start to see the intricate web of relationships, secrets, and power dynamics that led to that moment in Montecito. You'll witness how a simple revelation, shared in confidence by Princess Anne, triggered a sequence of events that would force one of the most famous couples in the world to confront the unthinkable. And while we may never know every detail, the pieces we do have tell a story of betrayal, strategy, emotional turmoil, and choices that could not be undone. The public may never see the full extent, but the consequences are undeniable. So I ask you, what would you do if you were Harry? If someone you trusted implicitly revealed a truth you never imagined possible? Could you act rationally, or would your emotions dictate your choices? Prince Harry's decision was both deeply personal and profoundly public. It wasn't just about Meghan. It was about family, legacy, and protecting the life he'd built for his children. And as we continue this story, you'll see why that fateful decision in Montecito was just the beginning, and why the revelations that follow would make headlines if they ever came to light. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever wondered what life is really like behind the glamorous facade of celebrity and royalty? Montecito, California, a coastal paradise of sun-drenched hills and perfectly manicured estates, might seem like the ultimate sanctuary. A place where the stress of royal duty and relentless paparazzi could be traded for quiet afternoons, private walks, and the illusion of freedom. But paradise is rarely what it seems. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, Montecito was meant to be that sanctuary. It was supposed to be their escape from a world that had scrutinized every word, every outfit, and every gesture. And yet, in the months leading up to the revelation that would shatter Harry's trust, the calm was deceiving. From the outside, everything appeared perfect. Their Montecito estate, with its sprawling gardens and panoramic views of the Pacific, seemed like a haven. Social media posts showed the family smiling, children playing, friends visiting, and charity work being celebrated. Yet, insiders whisper that behind those smiling photos was tension that only grew as the days passed. Small, almost imperceptible cracks began to appear. Perhaps a missed phone call here, a hurried text there, a glance that lingered too long, or a conversation that ended abruptly. To anyone else, it might have been normal stress, the challenges of maintaining a high-profile life. But to those closest to Harry, it was a warning, a whisper of things not yet revealed. It started subtly. The once warm and carefree breakfasts in the Montecito sunroom became shorter, more tense. The laughter that once filled the halls was replaced with cautious politeness. Staff noted small discrepancies, packages arriving at odd hours, visitors who were never mentioned, doors quietly opening and closing in the middle of the night. Harry, perhaps too absorbed in his philanthropic work and his attempts to balance personal freedom with public duty, didn't notice the full picture yet. He was focused on his children, on maintaining some semblance of normalcy in a world that would never let him have it. But Princess, and observing from afar and through her connections, did. Anne's role in this chapter cannot be overstated. She is known as the Queen's unwavering daughter, sharp-minded, meticulous, and protective of the family's reputation. For decades, she has served as a guardian of propriety and a silent force behind the scenes. And in this instance, it was her attention to detail that allegedly uncovered the first hints of Meghan's secret encounters. According to insiders, and noticed inconsistencies in schedules and communications. She reportedly pieced together subtle clues, invitations extended in private, meetings scheduled at odd hours, and discreet interactions with men who, to the untrained eye, seemed harmless, but to Anne, carried the weight of potential scandal. Imagine Harry at this time. He thought he had built a life of relative security, a protective bubble in Montecito where he could focus on his family and future. But the tension, almost invisible at first, began to weigh on him. He sensed Meghan's growing detachment, the sudden need for privacy, the uncharacteristic secrecy. Yet when Anne made her report, the truth hit like a tidal wave. Not rumors, not gossip, evidence, according to sources, that Meghan was allegedly meeting with high-profile men behind his back. The kind of revelation that doesn't just surprise, it paralyzes. But let's pause for a moment and ask the audience. How would you react if someone you trusted implicitly, someone who shared your dreams and ambitions, suddenly became a stranger? Would you investigate quietly? Would you confront them immediately? Or would you spiral into suspicion and doubt, trying to parse every word and gesture for hidden meaning? For Harry, every option was fraught with peril. Confronting Meghan could ignite public scandal. Ignoring it could jeopardize his family, his reputation, and the fragile trust that still existed. In Montecito, the environment added to the tension. On the surface, neighbors saw a calm, private life. They saw walks with children, trips to the beach, and serene garden gatherings. But behind closed doors, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Staff whispered of moments when Meghan would retreat to private rooms, locking doors that were rarely closed, speaking in hushed tones on encrypted phone lines. Security logs, according to insiders, indicated visitors at odd hours, some arriving under the guise of business meetings, others entirely unaccounted for. To an outsider, these details might appear mundane. To Harry, once Anne delivered her revelations, they became damning context. And yet, paradoxically, Harry also felt a deep conflict. He had loved Meghan for years, supported her in public and private, and moved oceans away from the life he knew to build a shared future with her. The notion that she might have been meeting other high-profile men in secret cut him to the core. It wasn't just about potential infidelity. It was about trust, the very foundation of their life together. And in the unique, high-pressure environment of Montecito, where every move was magnified and every decision scrutinized, the emotional stakes were staggering. Anne's alleged involvement added another layer of complexity. This wasn't just a private betrayal. It was a family matter, a royal matter, and a public matter all at once. By informing Harry, Anne forced him to confront a reality he may not have been prepared to face. According to insiders, Harry spent long nights reflecting on the situation, revisiting conversations, analyzing schedules, and questioning every assumption he had made about his marriage. The quiet Montecito nights, once a symbol of freedom, became a crucible of doubt, anger, and indecision. And here's where the tension thickened. Meghan, allegedly aware, or perhaps unaware, of Anne's scrutiny, continued her routine, oblivious to the fact that her actions were now under a microscope. To Harry, each meeting she attended, each call she took, was filtered through the lens of suspicion. The once calm Montecito estate transformed in his mind into a web of secrecy, each thread connected to potential scandal. As the days turned into weeks, Harry reportedly began documenting interactions, keeping track of unexplained absences and unaccounted for visitors. According to insiders, he started to notice a pattern, one that confirmed the earlier warning from Anne. Each meeting, each secretive gesture, was part of a larger picture, one that suggested deliberate concealment. And the emotional impact was profound. Harry felt betrayed, confused, and isolated. How could the woman he loved be living a double life, just steps away from him in what was supposed to be their sanctuary? It's worth asking. Have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted implicitly? The sense of disbelief, the attempts to rationalize the unthinkable, the lingering doubt that clouds every interaction afterward? That was Harry's reality in Montecito. His emotional state, combined with the weight of public scrutiny and family expectations, created a perfect storm. And while the outside world saw a couple maintaining appearances, inside, Harry was grappling with revelations that would lead to life-altering decisions. The calm, the peace, the so-called sanctuary of Montecito was never what it seemed. Behind every sunlit window, behind every carefully curated social media post, was a tension building toward a breaking point. The idyllic life that Harry and Meghan had hoped to construct was on the brink of collapse. And as Anne's revelation sank in, Harry realized that the decisions he made next would not just affect their lives. They would ripple outward, touching family, staff, neighbors, and the media in ways that no one could predict. By the end of this chapter of their life, the Montecito estate was no longer a haven. It had become a battlefield of trust, secrecy, and power. Harry's awareness of Meghan's alleged secret encounters changed everything. Every glance, every conversation, every gesture became loaded with meaning. And yet, the full scope of the drama, the decisions, confrontations, and fallout, was only beginning. The storm was coming, and it would sweep through their lives with relentless force. But just as Harry braced for the confrontation that was inevitable, another revelation surfaced, one that no one saw coming, even with Anne's initial disclosure. A detail, small yet explosive, that threatened to topple the delicate balance Harry was struggling to maintain. And that detail would force him to make a choice no man wants to face, a choice that would shatter the calm forever. Have you ever been blindsided by the truth when you least expected it? Imagine sitting in your home, believing you've escaped the pressures of the world, only to have someone you trust reveal a secret that shakes the very foundation of your life. For Prince Harry, that moment came not from the paparazzi, the tabloids, or the gossip-hungry public, but from Princess Anne, his aunt, his confidant, and arguably one of the most perceptive members of the royal family. Princess Anne isn't someone who jumps to conclusions lightly. Her reputation for keen observation and unwavering honesty precedes her. She has spent decades navigating palace intrigues, public scrutiny, and the complex labyrinth of royal diplomacy. If and said something mattered, it mattered. And when she allegedly brought to Harry's attention the hidden meetings Meghan had been having with high-profile men, the message wasn't subtle. It was an alarm bell that could not be ignored. So how did it happen? According to insider accounts, and had noticed patterns that others missed. Odd schedules, brief encounters with unlisted visitors, encrypted messages that hinted at secrecy, and social media posts that didn't quite align with reality. Each small anomaly, in isolation, might have seemed trivial. But Anne, with her decades of experience reading people and situations, connected the dots. What emerged wasn't just a pattern. It was a map of alleged deception, a trail that allegedly led straight to Meghan's clandestine meetings, and reportedly approached Harry with this information with caution and care. She knew the emotional bombshell she was about to drop could destabilize him, but she also understood that leaving it unspoken could cause far greater harm. Imagine the scene. A private conversation, the kind that few witnesses ever see, in which a trusted family member lays bare a revelation that could alter the course of your personal and public life. Harry's initial reaction, according to insiders, was disbelief. Surely not, he thought. Meghan? Here, in our Montecito sanctuary? How could this be? But Anne was methodical. She provided details, dates, and context. Every allegation was paired with circumstantial evidence, seemingly minor events that, when viewed collectively, painted a shocking picture. This wasn't conjecture. It was observation, carefully presented to someone who mattered deeply. And the impact on Harry was immediate. Shock, anger, confusion, and beneath it all, heartbreak. The woman he loved, the partner he had trusted implicitly, was allegedly living a double life, and he had been oblivious until and intervened. let's take a step back and consider what this meant in a broader sense. These weren't ordinary meetings. Reports suggest that the men Meghan allegedly interacted with were powerful, influential, and extremely well-connected. People whose involvement in any scandal could have seismic repercussions, not just for Meghan and Harry, but for the entire royal family. The stakes were astronomical. Anne's role wasn't just as a messenger. She was a gatekeeper, delivering the truth in a way that allowed Harry to make informed decisions while managing risk. And yet, despite the gravity of the revelation, Harry's emotions were a swirling storm. The human element of this drama cannot be overstated. He had loved Meghan, defended her publicly, and risked his own reputation and freedom to build a life together in California. And now, that life was under threat, not from external forces, but from the very partner he had trusted. The feeling of betrayal, compounded by Anne's meticulous presentation of evidence, was suffocating. How do you process something like this? How do you reconcile love with what appears to be deliberate secrecy? Anne reportedly shared her findings privately, in a controlled environment, knowing that the fallout could be explosive if the information leaked prematurely. She detailed alleged meetings, timing inconsistencies, and curious interactions that, when put together, suggested a pattern. And Harry, despite his initial disbelief, began to recognize the pieces as they fit together. Each small revelation made the next harder to ignore. The mosaic of secrecy became a vivid picture, impossible to dismiss. And here's where the story takes a twist. Anne's discovery didn't just shock Harry emotionally. It also forced him to think strategically. How do you act when confronted with evidence that could destroy a relationship, compromise your family's safety, and tarnish your public image? What steps do you take when the person involved is not only your spouse, but also a global figure, a duchess whose every action is scrutinized by millions? Harry reportedly began considering the options carefully, weighing immediate confrontation against the potential for long-term consequences. It's worth asking the audience, if you were Harry, would you have reacted differently? Would you confront immediately, demand explanations, or gather further evidence before taking action? The stakes were not merely personal. They were a tangled web of family loyalty, public perception, and media scrutiny. Every choice carried weight, and the wrong move could set off a chain reaction with far-reaching consequences. The Montecito estate, once a place of calm, now felt suffocating. Harry's mind raced through the timeline of events, replaying interactions, analyzing conversations, and reinterpreting gestures that had seemed innocuous just weeks before. Staff noted a change in his demeanor. Shorter patience, deeper introspection, and a quiet intensity that spoke to the gravity of what he had learned. The revelation wasn't just about secret meetings. It was about the trust he had placed in Meghan, the family he had tried to protect, and the life he had painstakingly built far from the glare of the world. And, understanding the delicacy of the situation, reportedly offered guidance on how to proceed. Her advice was measured, balancing moral clarity with strategic foresight. She knew that rash action could make matters worse, but she also understood that ignoring the revelations could be catastrophic. According to insiders, she urged Harry to gather more information, observe patterns, and consider the impact on their children, public image, and the wider royal family. It was a careful dance between emotional truth and strategic necessity. And while Harry processed this, Meghan's life continued with a sense of normalcy, or at least the appearance of it. Social engagements, calls with friends, and private meetings proceeded under the radar. But for Harry, every action now carried a dual interpretation. Was it innocent? Was it part of a hidden agenda? Each day became a test of patience, perception, and judgment. He found himself questioning everything he had once taken for granted: gestures of affection, casual conversations, even shared moments with their children. The revelation from and had cast a shadow over every aspect of their life. By now, Harry reportedly began to notice patterns that corroborated Anne's initial warning. Meetings that seemed ordinary, conversations that appeared trivial, all began to align with the picture Anne had painted. Each discovery added fuel to an emotional fire that was already blazing. Harry's internal struggle was compounded by the public-facing life he had to maintain. He could not afford to show vulnerability, uncertainty, or suspicion in the way the public might interpret it. Yet privately, he was reeling, forced to navigate the chasm between love and betrayal, trust and doubt. So what did Harry do? He began to plan. Quietly, deliberately, he considered his options. This wasn't a rash decision. It was a measured response to a revelation that threatened everything he held dear. Anne's discovery had given him both clarity and urgency. She had illuminated a path he could not ignore, and the consequences of inaction were unthinkable. The calm of Montecito had evaporated, replaced by a tension that would define the coming weeks, months, and possibly years. And just as Harry began preparing to confront this reality, another twist emerged, one that none of them could have predicted. A detail so subtle, so easily overlooked, that it had evaded Anne's initial scrutiny. Yet it was explosive, potentially catastrophic, and it demanded immediate attention. The stakes had escalated beyond personal betrayal, touching on reputation, family legacy, and the very nature of trust. The calm before the storm had ended, and the hurricane was only beginning. The question remains, what exactly did Anne uncover next? How would Harry respond when faced with this new, destabilizing information? And more importantly, how would these revelations ripple outward, affecting not just their private lives, but the perception of the royal family worldwide? The answers, as we'll see in the next chapter, will shock you and force us all to reconsider what we think we know about loyalty, secrecy, and the high-stakes world of royalty in exile. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to keep secrets, even from the person they claim to love most? What could compel a duchess, adored by millions, to allegedly step outside the bounds of trust in her own home? For Meghan Markle, according to sources close to the family, the Montecito sanctuary was never entirely hers to claim. Behind the smiling Instagram posts, the meticulously staged outings, and the appearances of domestic bliss, there existed a hidden world, a network of meetings with high-profile men that, if revealed, could ignite scandal on a global scale. These alleged encounters weren't happenstance. Insiders claimed that Meghan's meetings were carefully scheduled, often under the guise of professional or charitable obligations. Some of the men she reportedly met were figures of influence, people whose wealth, connections, or reputation could sway powerful circles. Others were less publicly known but held sway in business, media, or social networks that intersected with Hollywood and royalty. For Harry, the realization that Meghan might have been interacting with these individuals without his knowledge was devastating. It wasn't merely about secrecy. It was about intent, pattern, and potential consequences. Consider the emotional stakes. Harry had moved continents to carve out a life with Meghan, leaving behind royal duties, public favor, and the relative predictability of palace life. He had sacrificed privacy, family proximity, and even personal safety to protect a life that he believed they were building together. And yet, the allegations suggested that while he was striving for stability, Meghan was allegedly exploring connections that undermined the very foundation of that life. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. How could someone so publicly devoted to family and unity be simultaneously nurturing secret networks? It's important to understand the context of Montecito. Unlike the rigid, highly structured world of Buckingham Palace or Kensington, Montecito offered freedom, anonymity, and privacy, but it also presented an environment where hidden actions could occur unnoticed. Security cameras, staff, and neighbors could only observe so much. The estate's size, the discretion of its visitors, and Meghan's careful orchestration of meetings created an environment where secrets could thrive. Every call, every guest, every unscheduled outing became a potential piece in a puzzle that Harry was only beginning to see. Insiders say that Meghan's meetings often had dual purposes. On the surface, they appeared innocuous, discussions about charity, wellness, media ventures, or community engagement. But beneath the surface, sources allege, these interactions were calculated opportunities to cultivate influence, connections, or alliances unknown to Harry. And because these meetings occurred without his awareness, the implications were enormous. It wasn't just personal betrayal. It was the potential exposure of private dynamics that could disrupt Harry's carefully constructed life, affect his children, and even create ripples across royal and Hollywood networks. What's even more shocking, according to insiders, is the sophistication of Meghan's alleged planning. These weren't random encounters. They were deliberate. Meetings were scheduled to coincide with times when Harry was occupied with philanthropy, personal obligations, or travel. Locations were carefully chosen to minimize visibility, from discreet hotels to private residences, away from prying eyes. Communications were conducted through encrypted channels, ensuring minimal trace. For Harry, this level of secrecy was a revelation. He was learning not just that the meetings happened, but that they were meticulously orchestrated, indicating forethought and intent. Ask yourself, if you discovered your partner was engaging in secretive behavior at this scale, would you be able to process it rationally? Or would emotions, shock, betrayal, fear, anger, take over? Harry reportedly felt all of these at once. The sense of disorientation, combined with his protective instincts for his children and family, created a pressure cooker of emotion. He wasn't just grappling with betrayal. He was navigating the ethical and practical complexities of a situation that could not be ignored. But here's where the contradictions emerge. Meghan had, in many ways, presented herself as transparent, loving, and devoted. She was active in family life, engaged in public appearances, and cultivated an image of a partner committed to shared goals. Yet, the alleged hidden meetings created a duality that Harry could not reconcile. How could someone who is publicly devoted simultaneously engage in secretive behavior with high-profile men? The cognitive dissonance was staggering, and it left Harry questioning not only Meghan's intentions, but also his own judgment in choosing to trust her. Insider accounts suggest that the content of these meetings, while never fully disclosed to the public, was strategically significant. Some reportedly involved media figures with the potential to shape narratives favorable to Meghan, while others involved business magnates and advisors who could open doors to lucrative ventures. Harry, according to sources, began to piece together the implications. These were not social visits or casual encounters. They were deliberate actions with potential influence and leverage, unknown to him, and conducted without his input or consent. And yet, there was a human element here that made the situation even more complex. Harry was not simply processing alleged betrayals. He was also grappling with the fact that Meghan was the mother of his children, the woman he had publicly supported through intense scrutiny, and someone whose well-being he had long protected. The cognitive and emotional strain was immense. He had to balance anger with compassion, suspicion with the desire for understanding, and personal feelings with the high stakes of public exposure. Every choice he considered had ramifications that extended far beyond his personal heartache. Here's another twist. According to sources, Meghan's alleged secret meetings were not only with men outside Harry's immediate circle. They also intersected with people who had direct influence over public perception, both in media and in social circles that impacted royal reputation. This meant that Harry's response couldn't be purely personal. Acting impulsively could trigger public fallout, leaks, and speculation that might harm his children, his family, and his carefully curated efforts to maintain some semblance of private life. Each decision was a tightrope walk over a chasm of potential scandal. It's worth pausing to consider the emotional dynamics in play. For Harry, the revelation wasn't just about potential infidelity or secretive networking. It was about power, trust, and agency. Meghan's alleged ability to maneuver behind his back, leveraging connections and influence, challenged not only his trust, but also his sense of control over his own life. It was a stark reminder that even in exile, away from Buckingham Palace, the dynamics of influence, secrecy, and manipulation were never far from the surface. The alleged pattern of Meghan's behavior reportedly intensified over time. Initial isolated meetings, seemingly harmless, gradually became a web of interactions that Harry could not ignore. Each revelation, each connection uncovered, added weight to the cumulative picture. According to insiders, Harry began keeping track, noting dates, times, and possible contacts. His emotional state, already under strain, became increasingly burdened by the realization that what appeared casual to the public was actually a meticulously orchestrated series of secret interactions. At this point, the narrative takes another twist. Despite the gravity of the situation, Meghan reportedly continued her routine as if unaware of Harry's growing concern. Social outings, family activities, and even public appearances proceeded as usual. But behind this veneer of normalcy, Harry's perception of reality was shifting. The Montecito estate, once a sanctuary, became a place of tension, suspicion, and calculated observation. Every gesture, every meeting, every message took on amplified meaning. Here's a question for you. If you were Harry, how would you respond to discovering your partner's secretive behavior at this scale? Would you confront them immediately, risking confrontation and potential public fallout? Or would you gather evidence, observe patterns, and plan a strategic response? For Harry, the choice wasn't simple. It was a delicate balance between personal emotion, family protection, and public perception, a triad that, if mishandled, could result in irreparable damage. And just when the pressure seemed unbearable, another revelation allegedly emerged. Some of the meetings Meghan had were more than social or professional. They reportedly involved discussions that had strategic implications, conversations about influence, leverage, and positioning that could intersect with Harry's own efforts to maintain privacy and stability. The implications were staggering. Suddenly, the alleged secret meetings were not merely personal. They had potential ramifications for public perception, family reputation, and even security considerations. The stakes had escalated beyond personal betrayal. Montecito was no longer just a home. It was a stage where power, secrecy, and strategy intersected with love, trust, and family. Harry's patience, resilience, and judgment were being tested at every turn. And as he processed the full scope of these hidden meetings, it became clear that action was inevitable. The calm that had defined their life in California was gone, replaced by tension, calculation, and the looming necessity of confronting a reality that could no longer be ignored. But just as Harry prepared to act, to confront, and to reclaim the sense of trust that had been eroded, another layer of complexity surfaced, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about Meghan, their relationship, and the life they had built together. This was not just about meetings anymore. It was about the consequences of those meetings, the secrets they carried, and the revelations that had yet to come to light. And what happened next would force Harry to make choices that would echo far beyond Montecito, beyond California, and beyond the public's gaze. Have you ever had to confront someone you love, knowing that the conversation could change everything? The kind of conversation where words could either heal or destroy, where a single misstep could shatter the life you thought you were building. For Prince Harry, that moment arrived in Montecito in the form of a confrontation with Meghan Markle that insiders say was as inevitable as it was explosive. The stage was set behind closed doors in their Montecito estate. Away from the prying eyes of paparazzi and social media, the walls that had once offered sanctuary now contained tension so thick it was almost palpable. Harry had processed the revelations brought to him by Princess Anne. He had begun to see patterns, to understand alleged hidden meetings, to piece together what some would call a betrayal of trust. The calm, the idyllic life he had envisioned, was gone, and he knew that inaction was no longer an option. But confronting Meghan wasn't simple. He had loved her, publicly defended her, and shared his life with her in ways few could comprehend. How do you confront the woman you adore when the stakes are so high, when every word could reverberate across the globe? Insiders report that Harry spent days preparing, thinking through every scenario, weighing every possible reaction, and attempting to approach the conversation with a balance of emotion and strategy. When the moment finally came, the atmosphere inside the Montecito estate was tense. Sources claim that Harry, composed yet visibly shaken, initiated the conversation with a directness that left little room for deflection. "We need to talk," he reportedly said. Short, punchy, simple. But what followed was anything but simple. Allegedly, Harry confronted Meghan about the secret meetings, the high-profile men, the timing, the secrecy, and the implications. Every accusation was paired with facts and observations carefully noted over weeks. Harry's voice, according to insiders, carried a mix of incredulity, hurt, and controlled fury. He wasn't screaming, he was measured. But the emotional weight behind each word made it clear how deeply betrayed he felt. And Meghan? According to accounts, her reaction was a complex blend of surprise, defensiveness, and deflection. Some insiders describe a brief denial, followed by attempts to reframe the narrative, to cast the meetings as innocent, as professional, or as misunderstood. She reportedly emphasized her commitments to family, her obligations to causes she cared about, and her need for independence within the relationship. The tension between Harry's sense of betrayal and Meghan's attempts at justification created an emotional tinderbox. Imagine being in that room. Every word is heavy with significance. Every pause is loaded with implication. Every gesture is scrutinized. Harry reportedly tried to stay calm, but as the conversation progressed, emotions surged. The hurt wasn't just about the meetings themselves. It was about secrecy, deception, and the breach of trust that ran beneath the surface. For someone who had sacrificed so much to create a safe, loving life, the realization that that trust had been undermined was shattering. Insiders say the confrontation lasted hours. What may have started as a discussion evolved into a heated exchange. Questions were asked, deflections attempted, explanations offered. But Harry, fortified by Anne's initial revelations, remained firm. He was processing not only the present situation but also the implications for their future, personal, familial, and public. Every sentence he spoke was a combination of emotional expression and strategic calculation. There's a paradox here. While Harry was confronting Meghan, he was also aware of the optics, the consequences, and the broader implications. This wasn't a private squabble. It was a moment that could define their lives for years. If the confrontation escalated, if words were spoken that later leaked, the ramifications could ripple across media outlets, social media, and public opinion worldwide. It was a delicate dance between expressing hurt, demanding accountability, and protecting the family's reputation. Ask yourself, how do you balance raw emotion with strategic foresight when the stakes are this high? For Harry, every move in that room was a test of emotional intelligence. According to insiders, he remained calm on the surface, but the hurt simmered beneath, a hurt born of love betrayed, trust broken, and a future suddenly uncertain. Meghan's responses, while passionate, reportedly failed to address the depth of Harry's concerns, intensifying the tension. The confrontation reportedly revealed more than just the meetings. Allegedly, Meghan's demeanor, her evasions, and the timing of her explanations painted a picture of a relationship fraught with contradiction. Harry realized that the issues went beyond individual encounters. They were about patterns, about secrecy, about decisions made without mutual consent. Each revelation deepened the sense that Montecito, their sanctuary, was no longer a safe space. Insiders describe moments of emotional intensity, pauses filled with silent accusation, glances that conveyed more than words, and the occasional raised voice when frustration and heartbreak broke through the controlled surface. Harry reportedly questioned Meghan directly about the intent behind her alleged meetings. Was it personal, professional, opportunistic? Each answer, real or crafted, added to the complexity, forcing Harry to navigate not only the facts but also the emotional reality of the situation. And the children? Sources suggest that while Archie and Lilibet were shielded from the discussion, the awareness of parental tension reportedly weighed on Harry. He had to consider not only the relationship with Meghan but also the impact on his children, their sense of stability, and the environment in which they were growing up. The emotional calculus was immense. Personal betrayal, family responsibility, and public scrutiny all intersecting in one room. What makes this confrontation even more compelling is the alleged combination of emotional and strategic maneuvering. Harry, according to insiders, didn't simply react impulsively. He weighed options. Was this a conversation to salvage trust? Was it an opportunity to set boundaries? Could this relationship continue with transparency restored? Or had the breach gone too far? Every statement, every question, every pause was an attempt to navigate a treacherous emotional landscape. As the hours wore on, the confrontation reportedly reached a critical point. Harry, feeling the cumulative weight of betrayal, secrecy, and concern for his family, began to realize that words alone might not suffice. There needed to be action, decisive, deliberate, and unavoidable. The discussion, as intense as it was, became the prelude to decisions that would irrevocably alter their life in Montecito. And yet, even in this high-tension environment, there were contradictions. Meghan, while allegedly evasive in some areas, reportedly displayed genuine concern for Harry's feelings, moments of vulnerability that complicated the narrative. Harry, torn between anger and love, struggled to reconcile these conflicting signals. It was not a black and white situation. It was layered, nuanced, and emotionally exhausting. Now imagine the psychological pressure. Harry had to process betrayal, plan next steps, protect his children, and anticipate public fallout, all while sitting across from the person he had trusted implicitly. Each heartbeat, each word, each pause mattered. According to insiders, it was the most emotionally draining confrontation of his life, a defining moment that would shape subsequent decisions, including the fateful choice to remove Meghan from their shared Montecito home. But just as the confrontation seemed to reach a crescendo, an unexpected twist emerged. Sources claim that a previously unknown detail came to light, an additional layer of secrecy, a connection, or perhaps a message that forced Harry to reevaluate everything he had just learned. It wasn't just about past meetings anymore. It was about potential ongoing actions that could undermine the stability of their family and life in California. The calm before the storm was definitively over. The question now looms: how would Harry respond to this additional revelation? Could trust ever be restored? And what choices would he make that would ripple far beyond Montecito, shaping public perception, family dynamics, and the lives of everyone involved? The confrontation had revealed the depth of the alleged betrayal, but it also set the stage for the dramatic decisions that were about to follow, decisions that would shock insiders and the public alike. Have you ever faced a moment where there was no going back, where a choice had to be made despite every emotion screaming for delay? For Prince Harry, that moment arrived in Montecito after the confrontation with Meghan. The weight of Princess Anne's revelations, combined with the evidence of Meghan's alleged hidden meetings, had forced him into a corner. Every instinct, every emotion, every thought pointed to a decision that would forever change the course of their lives. But making that decision was anything but simple. Harry had spent weeks, some insiders claim months, processing the reality. He revisited conversations, re-examined patterns, and tried to reconcile the woman he loved with the person who had allegedly been secretly cultivating relationships behind his back. Was it betrayal? Was it ambition? Was it something else entirely? Each scenario carried profound implications, and the stakes were not just personal. They were familial, public, and even strategic. Imagine sitting in Harry's shoes. The home he had envisioned as a sanctuary now felt like a labyrinth of secrets. Every room, every hallway, even the garden paths where his children played, were tainted by the awareness of what had occurred behind the scenes. He had to consider not just his feelings, but the safety, emotional well-being, and future of Archie and Lilibet. Every choice he made would have ripple effects on their lives. Sources close to the family suggest that Harry didn't rush into the decision impulsively. Instead, he analyzed every option. One path was confrontation and reconciliation, demanding full transparency, setting strict boundaries, and attempting to rebuild trust. Another path was separation, a move that would ensure immediate safety and control, but come with emotional and public consequences. And lurking behind both paths was the specter of media scrutiny. Any misstep could ignite a scandal, and for someone in Harry's position, a scandal has far-reaching implications. The emotional complexity cannot be overstated. Harry's love for Meghan, tempered by years of shared experiences and public battles, conflicted with his sense of betrayal. The decision wasn't just about past actions, it was about future stability. Could he allow the pattern of secrecy to continue? Could he live with the doubt and uncertainty, knowing that the alleged hidden meetings might escalate or continue? Or did he have to act decisively, even if it meant breaking their home apart? Imagine the mental calculus. Harry reportedly weighed the timing, the potential reactions of family members, the possible impact on the children, and the public narrative. Every consideration was fraught with tension. He knew that Anne's role had provided clarity. Without her revelations, he might never have understood the full scope of the situation. Her insight had illuminated a path he could not ignore. But the decision itself would carry weight that Anne could not share. It was his alone to bear. Insider accounts suggest that Harry finally reached the conclusion that action was necessary. Not out of anger alone, not out of desire for retribution, but out of necessity, to protect his children, his household, and the integrity of their life in Montecito. The realization was harrowing. The life they had imagined, the calm and safe existence, was compromised. To restore balance, boundaries had to be set. And the first boundary, insiders allege, involved asking Meghan to leave their home. The alleged decision to remove Meghan from Montecito was not taken lightly. According to sources, Harry spent hours planning logistics, considering legal implications, and evaluating the emotional consequences. He needed to ensure that the children remained protected, that security protocols were followed, and that the move minimized potential chaos. This was not a decision made in haste. It was a calculated action born of months of observation, reflection, and emotional reckoning. And yet, the decision was as emotionally devastating as it was necessary. Harry reportedly struggled with conflicting feelings: love, betrayal, guilt, and responsibility, all colliding at once. He had always envisioned a future with Meghan, a partnership rooted in shared values and experiences. But the alleged secret meetings and the breach of trust had altered the narrative irreversibly. What remained was not just a personal heartbreak, but a moral imperative: act, or risk further damage to his family and his own well-being. Let's pause for a moment to consider the public dimension. Montecito is a place where privacy is rare and leaks can happen quickly. Harry had to anticipate media scrutiny, potential leaks from staff, and the inevitable social media reaction. Every step needed to be meticulously planned. Moving Meghan out of their home was not simply a personal action. It was a public act that would be dissected, analyzed, and scrutinized by millions worldwide. Sources also suggest that Harry considered alternative measures: restrictions on social interactions, increased transparency, or mediation, but each option carried its own risks. At this stage, it became clear that only decisive action could restore a sense of order. According to insiders, Harry's plan was executed quietly, with careful attention to the logistics and security of everyone involved. The goal was not humiliation, but protection of his children, his home, and his sense of personal integrity. Emotional intensity in this decision cannot be overstated. Harry reportedly experienced waves of doubt, wondering if he was overreacting, questioning whether forgiveness was possible, and wrestling with the potential emotional fallout for Meghan. But at the same time, the clarity of the situation demanded resolution. The choice was between enduring ongoing uncertainty and taking decisive action. He chose the latter. And yet, even as the decision was carried out, the consequences began to unfold in unpredictable ways. Staff reportedly sensed tension, neighbors noticed unusual activity, and whispers of discord began circulating. Meghan, upon being asked to leave, allegedly expressed a range of emotions: shock, anger, defensiveness, and perhaps even subtle attempts to negotiate. The action itself was a catalyst, forcing reactions that had been simmering beneath the surface to finally emerge. It's worth asking the audience: how would you react if confronted with a situation where love and betrayal intersected at such high stakes? Would you act decisively, like Harry, prioritizing protection and clarity? Or would you attempt reconciliation, hoping that transparency and dialogue could repair the damage? Harry's choice, according to insiders, was a blend of pragmatism, strategy, and emotional necessity. It was not just about removing Meghan from a home. It was about restoring a sense of order to a life that had become chaotic and unpredictable. And here's the twist that makes this moment so dramatic. Even after the decision to act, new layers of complexity emerged. According to sources, Meghan's alleged network of contacts was still active, meaning that Harry's action, while decisive, did not entirely resolve the underlying tension. The revelation of her hidden meetings, combined with her reaction to being asked to leave, created a chain of events that would unfold over weeks, months, and even years, leaving lasting implications for the couple, their children, and the wider perception of the royal family. By the end of this pivotal chapter, insiders claim that Harry had not only acted but had also established a framework for the next steps: protecting the children, maintaining household stability, and preparing for the public and private fallout. The Montecito estate, once a haven of calm, had become a site of decision, action, and irreversible change. Harry's choice to act was more than personal. It was strategic, emotional, and consequential. But just as he believed the immediate crisis was under control, another revelation loomed: a subtle, yet potentially explosive, detail about Meghan's ongoing contacts that could destabilize the carefully executed decision. The tension was far from over, and the story that began with Princess Anne's discovery was only getting darker, more complex, and infinitely more compelling. The question now becomes, what new information surfaced after Harry's decisive action? How would he respond? And what would be the emotional and public consequences of this choice? The answers are coming, and they will push the Montecito drama to unimaginable heights. What do you do when the person you've trusted makes a decision that changes everything? When someone you love, someone you've built a life with, suddenly distances themselves, not just emotionally, but physically, from the shared life you've imagined. For Meghan Markle, Prince Harry's decisive action to ask her to leave Montecito was more than a personal shock. According to insiders, it was the beginning of a response that would ripple through every corner of their lives, private and public alike. Imagine the moment, being asked to leave the home you've shared, the sanctuary you thought was yours. Shock, disbelief, confusion, all of these emotions collided at once. Sources claim Meghan was taken aback, struggling to comprehend the gravity of Harry's decision. She reportedly oscillated between denial and defensiveness, insisting that the allegations were either exaggerated or misinterpreted. At times, insiders describe her as incredulous, questioning how a life built on love could unravel so abruptly. Yet, according to accounts, Meghan was not passive. Far from it. While Harry's action was decisive, her response was reportedly strategic. Insiders claim that she began to leverage connections, call on allies, and orchestrate communications designed to protect her reputation and maintain influence over public perception. Social media channels, charitable associations, and media contacts became conduits for shaping the narrative, a narrative that suggested resilience, independence, and self-assurance in the face of personal conflict. Ask yourself, if you were in Meghan's position, how would you respond? Would you retreat quietly, hoping for reconciliation, or would you take immediate steps to assert your position? According to insiders, Meghan chose the latter. Her reaction combined emotional intensity with calculated moves, signaling that she would not accept Harry's action without resistance, at least in the public and strategic arenas. The emotional dynamic of her response was complex. While publicly composed and seemingly graceful, insiders suggest that privately, Meghan experienced a storm of frustration, anger, and hurt. She reportedly questioned why Harry had acted so decisively, why Princess Anne's revelations had influenced him so heavily, and why the trust between them had eroded so quickly. These private reflections, however, were interwoven with calculated outward appearances, carefully curated statements, controlled appearances, and strategic positioning that maintained an image of dignity and poise. Insiders claim Meghan also made attempts to negotiate behind the scenes. Meetings, calls, and messages reportedly sought clarification, explanations, or concessions. She allegedly aimed to secure personal space, preserve her privacy, and maintain connections that could provide leverage or support in the unfolding situation. In essence, her response was multidimensional, emotionally charged, strategically calculated, and meticulously managed. But the drama did not stop with communication alone. According to sources, Meghan's alleged hidden network, the same high-profile individuals who had reportedly been part of her secretive interactions, was activated in subtle ways. Discussions, advisory input, and influence strategies were allegedly employed to counterbalance Harry's decisive move. This network, while discreet, added an additional layer of complexity to an already tense situation, forcing Harry to consider not just the personal and familial consequences of his action, but also the broader social and strategic implications. The tension escalated further when insiders claim Meghan began to employ subtle public signals. Social media posts, charitable appearances, and carefully timed engagements reportedly conveyed messages of independence, strength, and resilience. Each move was calculated to protect her public persona and maintain influence, while Harry executed his plan to restore stability to Montecito. These signals were not overt confrontations, but were nonetheless impactful, creating a subtle pushback against Harry's decisive action. At the same time, according to sources, Meghan's emotional response was genuine and raw behind closed doors. Frustration, grief, and confusion reportedly dominated her private reactions. She reportedly grappled with the notion that someone she loved and trusted had acted in a manner she perceived as unilateral. There were moments of intense dialogue with Harry, moments of reflection, and moments of private deliberation in which she weighed her next steps carefully. Every reaction was part of a complex emotional and strategic matrix, balancing vulnerability with power. Imagine the psychological pressure. Meghan had to reconcile personal betrayal with the need to maintain public composure. She had to navigate familial loyalties, media perception, and potential fallout, all while considering her own future, her influence, and the well-being of her children. Each action, each statement, and each calculated move carried immense weight. According to insiders, this intricate balancing act defined her response over the following days and weeks. Insiders also indicate that Meghan's response was shaped by the perceived threat to her autonomy and reputation. The idea that Harry's action, guided by Princess Anne's revelations, could undermine her position was reportedly a key motivator. She sought to maintain control over her narrative, protect her image, and safeguard her relationships and networks. It was a calculated counterbalance to Harry's decisiveness, a maneuver designed to assert agency in a situation that could have otherwise appeared overwhelmingly one-sided. The emotional stakes, however, were not purely strategic. According to reports, Meghan experienced a range of personal emotions: hurt, confusion, and frustration intermingled with a desire for understanding and reconciliation. She reportedly questioned whether Harry's decision reflected a temporary emotional reaction or a permanent shift in trust. These private deliberations, combined with her strategic maneuvers, created a duality in her response, an interplay between vulnerability and calculated action. And as the weeks unfolded, the alleged drama deepened. Meghan's actions, whether deliberate or reactive, reportedly led to heightened tension within the Montecito estate. Staff members noted increased vigilance, discreet monitoring of communications, and heightened security protocols. The children, though largely shielded from the conflict, reportedly sensed subtle shifts in the household atmosphere, adding an emotional layer to an already fraught situation. At the same time, according to insiders, Harry remained resolute. While Meghan's response was emotionally and strategically complex, he reportedly focused on protecting the children, preserving household stability, and maintaining his own emotional equilibrium. The interplay between action and reaction, between decision and counteraction, created a dynamic tension that defined this chapter of their Montecito life. And just when it seemed that Meghan's response had reached its peak, insiders suggest a new twist emerged, one that added another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. A previously undisclosed communication, a subtle meeting, or perhaps an interaction with a high-profile figure reportedly surfaced, forcing Harry to reassess the situation once more. The stakes had escalated beyond personal trust or betrayal. They now encompassed influence, reputation, and the delicate balance of public perception. This brings us to a critical reflection. In a relationship under constant scrutiny, with global eyes watching, how do private actions intersect with public consequences? How do emotional reactions interact with strategic calculations? For Harry and Meghan, the Montecito home, intended as a sanctuary, had become a stage where every move was magnified, every emotion observed, and every decision consequential. The chapter closes with a lingering question: how would Harry respond to Meghan's multifaceted, emotionally charged, and strategically calculated reaction? Could reconciliation be possible, or was the path towards separation and decisive action now inevitable? The answers are on the horizon, and the Montecito drama is about to escalate further, revealing layers of tension, strategy, and emotional stakes that few could have anticipated. Have you ever stumbled across a message, an email, or a note that changed everything? One that rewrote your understanding of a relationship, your trust in someone, and even your perception of reality? For Prince Harry, the discovery of allegedly hidden communications, emails, texts, and discreet messages added a whole new layer to the Montecito drama, compounding the revelations brought to him by Princess and in the subsequent confrontation with Meghan. These messages were reportedly meticulous, carefully crafted, and deeply revealing. According to insiders, they detailed meetings, discussions, and interactions that Meghan allegedly had with high-profile men, contacts Harry had no knowledge of, yet ones that could carry significant influence and consequence. The emails weren't just casual exchanges. They were strategic, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, and always designed to protect, enhance, or advance Meghan's personal and professional interests. Imagine the emotional weight of receiving this information. Harry had already faced a confrontation, analyzed patterns of behavior, and made a decisive move to ask Meghan to leave the Montecito home. But these hidden communications forced him to question everything again: the timing of meetings, the intent behind gestures, and the potential repercussions of interactions that had been intentionally concealed. Each email, each text, became a puzzle piece, forming a mosaic of secrecy that was both elaborate and alarming. One of the most shocking elements, insiders claim, was the nature of the language used in some of these communications. They reportedly reflected meticulous planning, often framed in professional terms, but laced with undertones of strategic positioning. Every word mattered. Each sentence had implications not just for the immediate moment, but for long-term perception and influence. Harry, accustomed to openness in his personal relationships, reportedly felt a profound sense of betrayal. This was not just secrecy, it was carefully constructed concealment. The timing of these messages reportedly played a critical role. Some were sent during moments when Harry was occupied with the children, public duties, or philanthropic initiatives. Others coincided with events or gatherings in Montecito, moments that would otherwise have seemed ordinary. This level of planning suggested, insiders say, an intentional effort to operate in the shadows, ensuring that the truth remained hidden until discovered, or perhaps never discovered at all. Ask yourself, how would you feel if, in the middle of confronting betrayal, you uncovered a trove of communications that confirmed what you suspected and revealed even more than you could have imagined? Harry's emotional state, according to sources, was a complex blend of validation, shock, and renewed anger. These emails and messages didn't just corroborate Anne's revelations. They painted an even more detailed picture of alleged secretive behavior that demanded action. The content of the messages, insiders report, ranged from mundane logistical planning to discussions that suggested influence and networking with individuals of high profile and power. Some correspondences were allegedly cryptic, requiring contextual understanding to interpret fully. Others were explicit enough to confirm suspicions without leaving room for ambiguity. For Harry, the discovery of these messages was both a confirmation of his worst fears and a catalyst for further decisive action. The emotional beats in this chapter are significant. Imagine feeling a mix of anger, disappointment, and urgency, knowing that private communications could destabilize your family, public image, and personal sense of trust. Harry reportedly spent countless hours reviewing these messages, cross-referencing them with known meetings, schedules, and patterns of behavior. The mental toll, insiders suggest, was immense, combining grief, rage, and a heightened sense of vigilance. At the same time, these hidden communications were not merely a record of the past. They indicated potential ongoing actions. Insiders claim that some emails and texts suggested plans or intentions for future interactions, amplifying the sense of urgency. For Harry, this wasn't just about reacting to past behavior. It was about anticipating future actions and mitigating risks before they could escalate further. The hidden messages had transformed the situation from a personal confrontation to a strategic challenge with wide-ranging implications. The psychological tension was compounded by the duality of Meghan's persona. Publicly, she maintained an image of composure, elegance, and familial commitment. Privately, the hidden communications painted a different picture, one of calculated interactions that Harry had no part in. This duality, insiders suggest, was difficult for him to reconcile. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was about the cognitive dissonance of seeing one person presented in two conflicting lights simultaneously. Harry reportedly began to share his concerns with a small circle of trusted aides and advisors. The emails and messages were analyzed, patterns were mapped, and potential implications were assessed. Every piece of communication was treated as a data point, every sender or recipient as a possible influence, and every timing discrepancy as significant. The process, according to insiders, was exhaustive, detailed, and emotionally draining. Harry wasn't just processing betrayal. He was constructing a strategy in response to it. At the same time, the discovery of these communications reportedly prompted new conversations between Harry and Meghan, though these exchanges were fraught with tension. Insiders claim that he confronted her with specific emails and texts, seeking explanations, clarifications, and assurances. The responses, while sometimes defensive or evasive, offered glimpses into Meghan's reasoning and intentions, though according to insiders, they rarely fully satisfied Harry's need for transparency and trust. It's worth asking the audience, how would you handle discovering hidden communications that confirm and expand upon suspicions of secrecy? Would you confront directly, or would you analyze and strategize first? Harry reportedly did both, balancing emotional expression with the need for careful planning. His approach reflects the complex interplay of personal emotion, public responsibility, and the high-stakes environment in which he lives. And just when the tension seemed at its peak, insiders report an additional twist. Some communications allegedly suggested external influence or coordination with third parties. The implications of this were profound. It wasn't merely about private secrecy. It was about networks, leverage, and potential public narrative management. The emails indicated, insiders say, that Meghan's interactions were connected to broader strategies that could affect reputation, media coverage, and social influence. For Harry, this was an entirely new dimension of concern. The impact of discovering these hidden communications on the household cannot be overstated. Staff reportedly became increasingly aware of tension, security measures were heightened, and the atmosphere inside Montecito became charged with anticipation and uncertainty. The children, though shielded, reportedly sensed subtle shifts in mood and tone, adding an emotional layer to the unfolding drama. Every email and message had consequences beyond words. They reverberated through the household, altering the dynamics of daily life. In this heightened environment, Harry reportedly focused on immediate priorities, protecting the children, maintaining household stability, and preparing for potential fallout. The hidden communications had transformed a personal confrontation into a strategic challenge. Every decision he made now had to consider not only emotional and familial factors, but also public perception, media reaction, and potential long-term ramifications. And just as Harry began to stabilize his approach, insiders